How y'all doing? How y'all doing? This is Alvin with Trying Success here on the Old Fashioned Health Network. Good health inside and out. I have a absolutely very interesting show today from a gentleman. His name is Dave Supple. He has written this book called African American Roots. I actually found Dave on social media, on TikTok, and I was going through there, and he started talking about all these ancient designs and where they came from and the architecture of African roots. And I was like, let me keep watching it. And then I started following Dave, and I started seeing more and more and more. And I had to bring this guy on my show so he could explain to you all my facts. You'll be fascinated by it too. But Dave wrote a book. But without further ado, let me introduce Dave. Dave, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Alvin. Thank you very much for having me on your show. It's a pleasure and an honor.
No, man, I'm happy to have you. So look, tell the people a little bit about yourself before we get started into this.
Yeah, I mean, I own an architecture firm in Boston. I went to school for architecture, and have a family. Grew up outside of New York City and Connecticut, small, and I kind of stumbled upon this topic of this book. Was never intending to write a book on it. I just kind of stumbled upon it, and once I had. I just kept looking and looking and looking and looking, and that really is where the book came from. I can give you a little bit more on that if you'd like.
Well, okay. So here's what was fascinating for me. When I was looking at Dave's social media, he started talking about where these designs actually came from, and looking at, if you all can see some of the pictures at the bottom, and then even just the picture that's in Dave's cover of his book. Now, this background that you all see is also part of the images that's in Dave's book. First of all, tell them a little bit about the book and kind of how it's later, because I mean,
it's really a picture book. There's over 130 pictures in the book, and the story is really told visually. Mm-hmm. That's really, I think, what is the most powerful thing about the book is I'm not telling you. You don't have to believe me. Mm. You just need to look at the pictures. All right. And that's all I'm asking folks to do is just look at the pictures, and you come away with whatever conclusion you come away with. Basically we're taught on this subject of classical architecture. The book is called Classical Architecture's African Roots. Mm-hmm. And this, the cover, which you see there, has the Parthenon, which is in Athens, Greece. And this is really considered the most kind of best example of classical architecture, one of the best known examples. But kind of what I stumbled upon, and then I researched quite thoroughly, is that its roots are most definitely from Africa, specifically ancient Egypt, what the inhabitants refer to as Kemet. Mm-hmm. And the book is really just about showing that and showing, hey, I also, it's 20 chapters, mm-hmm. and each chapter takes up a element or a facet of classical architecture. Right. And I have quotes in every chapter of what we're currently taught on the subject from, Encyclopedia Britannica, mm-hmm. these, sources that are supposed to be everybody believes, and this is, the status quo, and this is what's put out there, what's in our history books. And then I ask you to look, and you see something totally different on terms of the source of where these different aspects and elements of classical architecture come from, that still stand today. That's kind of the beauty of it. I've been calling this book the smoking gun, mm-hmm. that has been missing. There has been a lot of discourse on this topic of like, oh, the Greeks got it from the Egyptians. And I have these books. There's been other books written on this, but this guy, Martin Bernal, in the, I think this was the 80s or 90s, he wrote a trilogy called Black Athena. Okay. But the book, there's no pictures.
No. Yeah, that would be hard.
There's no pictures in this book. And so, yeah. but most people don't read. Like, I've never read this book. I just have the book. Mm-hmm. But the point is that, there's a lot of evidence there already. Mm-hmm. But having these buildings still stand today and having you be able to just look at them and compare and say, oh, yes, logically, this definitely was a progression from this. It's kind of like the smoking gun that's been missing, is what I feel.
So your point in the book, one of the things you want to highlight in the book is that what we've been taught about how these sculptures and where they originally came from didn't necessarily is not actually accurate as what you've been able to compare and discover.
Yeah. And it's visibly apparent. If you look at the pictures, you will see it's really not, it's conclusive. Like again, I'm telling you you come up with your own conclusion, but that is my conclusion. And any person that I have, showed this material to, no matter where they started off on the topic, comes to the same conclusion. Because that is what went down. And we don't just have the pictures, we have, the historical accounts. I'm not an academic, right? But I did go through the process of validating every source. I have thorough notes on my sources, and it is backed up by historical accounts. The ancient Greeks, from about 1200 to 700 BC, is known as Greeks' Dark Age.
Okay.
That's like a thing in the history books. They had Dark Age. And then they came out of that into this classical period. And then like everything that good that ever came from on Earth came from there at that time. It's kind of what seems to occur. There's all these innovations, one of which is the buildings. But what folks don't, what isn't taught at the same time that actually is true that occurred is in 650 BC, a long-standing ban on foreigners was lifted in ancient Egypt, wherein they could now come into ancient Egypt and be exposed to all the technology and innovations that were there that they had never seen before. And in 600 BC, you see the first stone temple.
Right.
Nothing exists. They're coming out of their dark ages. So, what happened there? I think it's pretty evident. And one of the things is that the Greeks acknowledged it. It wasn't, they weren't the ones who, created this misinformation and, altered the truth.
Right.
They openly espoused that the ancient Egyptians were much more advanced and had been around for thousands of years. Now, in this book, Classical Architecture's African Roots, I don't get into the color of the skin of the ancient Egyptians, but I do. Okay. And the reason why is because I really wanted to leave this book as a picture book, so that that's the result I'm looking to achieve with this book is that you would say, at the end of this book, you're gonna come to the conclusion of like, okay, yes, this came from that. There was a definite influence. Like, you can't really walk away from going through all these pictures and not having that same conclusion. I have a book that the majority of which is completed, called Restoring Africa's Legacy of Creation, where I do very much go into the motives of why this misinformation occurred. And the misinformation occurred because of, the fact that those who started the misinformation, who started to erase what they knew to be true, which is that the Greeks got it from the ancient Egyptians, did that to position themselves with a white Europe. and away from a Black Africa.
Okay.
And from my research, just to answer your question specifically, the Greeks testified that the Egyptians were a colony from Ethiopia, and that they came from Ethiopia. The first, quote unquote historian is supposed to be this Greek Herodotus, and he wrote that the Egyptians had black skin and woolly hair.
Okay.
That for the Greeks, for the Egyptians, it was really about a culture. Mm-hmm. It was really, so they didn't care about the color of your skin. They just cared about your values and adopting. If you were down with their culture, it was like white. You could be from Asia, from Europe. It really didn't matter to them. And so it was a mixed race, like black, like by today's standards in America, most definitely black, right? But it wasn't really about them. And they shared their knowledge openly with anyone who was willing to come and adopt it. And it's really an amazing example for us today to help end that divisiveness. But the truth does need to be acknowledged. It is definitely a legacy that has been denied. Mm-hmm. And I do have very conclusive evidence, which I'm releasing in my second book, that, black or white, this divisive conversation.
We deal with that a lot now already as it is with the whole critical race theory thing.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering how with the great information that you're sharing, will that be one of the books they'd be like, no, we don't want this in the classroom because that's revealing that it was information?
Maybe. I'm sure you would have to be unwilling to look, though. Right. That's the beauty of this book.
Right.
This book in particular, it'd be really hard. And it's kind of like, it's a little bit of a chess move for me, honestly, because I don't get into the race topic with this book. Okay. Those that started the misinformation, it was in the mid 1800s. Some of them owned slaves. Mm-hmm. Slavery. You had slavery in America at that point in time. Mm-hmm. And they believed that the Egyptians were black. So like you could almost like skip, it does matter. That conversation does matter. But in terms of like why the misinformation occurred, I have conclusive evidence. Like one, the main individual in particular thought they were black. The Egyptians were black. That comes from the Bible, from the Curse of Ham. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not, but this was used as a justification for the slavery of black Africans. Mm-hmm. And it was supposedly like, it was used to justify it. And they knew that they also knew, and I have this conclusively because they wrote down both things, that they knew that the Greeks got it from the ancient Egyptians. They knew that without a doubt.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to ask you a little bit about the detail in some of these statues. There's like 3 pictures that we have down here at the bottom. And mm-hmm. When I start looking at your artwork, for some reason I started thinking about the leaning pizza tower.
Tower pizza, sure.
Yeah.
It's classical, yeah.
Is that one of the pieces that you can look at and tell it was actually originated from African?
Totally. That's kind of the beauty of it. One of the things that, researching this information, I went to school for architecture. Okay. Like I've sat in many a lecture hall and a dark room with the screen up and looking at slides. And, they typically start with Egypt and Mesopotamia, and, they start with pyramids. Right. And that's kind of like when you think of Egyptian architecture, that's where it starts and ends for most people. Mm-hmm. And I found that to be true in my education, which was at a top, prestigious university. And then they get into classical architecture, and it's just kind of like this stuff just like popped up,
right? Right.
That's really why this book is needed, because it's what has become our, history books, which is like supposedly the truth, is really been slanted. And so, this allows you to see for yourself. But what I found to be is that, these fundamental and classical architecture is the most prevalent. You get a little more awareness of what classical architecture is, which you will from this book. It's really like the root of it, So if you want to dig into any subject, you get to like the origins of it. You're bound to understand it so much better. And you do from looking at this book. But then you go out in the streets and you start looking at buildings, and it happened to me. I was like, oh my gosh, like that's where this came from. That's where this, and it was in Africa, right. All these points. And so, one of these reactions I think could be like, oh, classical architecture is racist. Let's knock it down. Let's burn it down. But it's actually African in nature. Most foundationally is actually African. So it's like the actual structures haven't changed. It's just our mind,
right?
Our understanding has changed. And as a result of that, what you see changes. That's part of the beautiful thing about this. I think it's just actually being able to properly recognize and acknowledge and validate, where this came from. The Leaning Tower Pizza in Italy is a piece of classical architecture. So there are so many aspects of classical architecture, up until from the Greeks, then the Romans, then you have the Middle Ages, and then the Renaissance. They all are based on classical architecture.
Yep. So let me ask you, I want the listeners to know this. So this book you wrote, you're giving this book away. It's not a cost for this book, right?
No, I'm releasing the book for free as a ebook online. It'll be like a flippable ebook. Mm-hmm. And I'm doing that just so the information gets out. I want it to get out. I don't, it's I'm making it so it's very easily shareable and easily accessible, because my goal for this book is for the information to be known. That's also why it's primarily a picture book. Like, most people don't read books, but they will look at pictures,
right?
And captions. Right. It's like a picture and caption book is really what it is. But the story is really well told that way. And so I am slated for a November 3rd release. I might be extending that a little bit, but it definitely will be in November, early November.
Okay.
I'm really excited about it, to get it out and share this information and let people see for themselves. Kind of how this came to be is that I wrote a blog called, was on Tuskegee University in Tuskegee, Alabama.
Okay.
It used to be that the architect and builder were one and the same.
Okay.
Okay. If you look in the English dictionary in the 1800s and you look up architect and you look up builder, they're synonyms. They actually meant the same thing.
Right.
And it was separated for social status. This is actually how I found about it. I was writing a book about the true history of the architect and builder. And I knew that they were one and the same for the majority of history. And I knew that the history books had been changed to make it appear that they were always separated.
Right.
And I knew the men who did it, and I knew the reason they did it was for social status.
Right.
Because they could not reach this higher plateau of a gentleman because of their connection with manual labor, with physical labor.
Okay.
And so that they created this separation. Okay, the architect is white collar, the builder is blue collar now. And they did that, even though that's where they came from. They came from the building trades. They did that to raise their social status. These are the same individuals that also knew that the Greeks got it from Africa. Right. And these are also the same individuals who started to change the history books on this topic. I wrote a blog on Tuskegee University. The reintegration of design, architect, and builder is known as design build today.
Okay.
And I was crediting Tuskegee University in the end of the 1800s. They created the first design build curriculum in America. Today, there's over 100 design build programs.
And this was
in Tuskegee was the first. It had been unrecognized, and this blog I wrote was documenting that and saying, hey, this is the first that is now being emulated and it is quite popular, but this was the first. And a gentleman named Melvin Mitchell, who wrote a book called African American Architects, commented on that blog post, and I became aware of him. I read his book, African American Architects, and in that book, he has a picture called Hatshepsut's Temple. It's in the book, and I had never seen this temple before. It's extremely classical in nature. It has what's called a colonnade, which is a row of columns,
right? Like
multiple,
like the picture on there.
Yeah. It's not one of those three, but it is. You look at it; it's like similar to like what you see in our Capitol buildings with the central staircases. And I had never seen this building before, and I was like, "How could I? Wait, I wouldn't." This is like my subject. How do I not have never seen this?
Right.
That's actually what started me looking into it. And once I started, I just kept uncovering and finding more and more. And it just didn't make sense to me.
Right.
And so I kept looking. And, you're left at the end of this book, you're left with the question of like, you have conclusively seen where classical architecture's roots are. You've also seen this, we're taught like the complete opposite. And so it begs the question, like, how the hell did this happen? Mm-hmm. And so that connection actually happened at the end of my research.
So I want to make sure people are able to find this book. Can you give them your information on how to get to this?
Yeah, I'm recently on TikTok.
I know, right?
I just started up on TikTok, but David Supple, David Muniz is my middle name, and Supple, Supple, it's my last name. I am on Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, Facebook, all those. You can find me at all those places. And yeah.
Well, man, I appreciate you sharing this with me, Dave. I'm looking forward to your children's book that we talked a little bit about.
Yeah.
And I'm going to make sure I put all your social media stuff down here so people can get the book. I have a copy of it, and it is absolutely amazing. Great information, man. I love looking. I get stuck on the pictures. I keep looking at the pictures just like you say.
Yeah.
And then I'll go back to reference and look. I was like, man, this is so cool. So thank you so much for sharing this, man, for uncovering this. And I hope I'm going to definitely post it everywhere that I have it on our school platform, so the kids can learn
awesome.
more about the history of architecture when it comes to African Americans, and that's good. And I just appreciate you sharing it, man. I really do.
Well, it's my extreme pleasure, Alvin, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to your audience, and I hope they're able to see it for themselves as well and share it as well.
Now, people are going to ask this question like, now, is he originally from Africa himself, or did you do Ancestry.com and find out what
I haven't. My mother is Puerto Rican. My father is Irish.
Okay.
So that's my heritage.
Well, that would be pretty close to African American. That closer,
Yeah, I haven't done the ancestry thing, but my mother has. So,
right.
Definitely have some Africa in me. But you know what? This is another kind of thing that I hope this book leads to is, if you go back far enough, we all came from Africa. Okay.
Yep.
So, and we are one race. We are the human race. Okay. Mm-hmm. There has been this misinformation, what this is a prime example of, that has, oppressed some of us.
Yeah.
But, with those lies lifted and the truth known, I really believe it's going to help unite us. And we are the human race. We have so much more in common than we have differences.
Yes, we do.
and you know, it's a small minority that was able to put this misinformation there that helped keep us divided. And, you know, this divisiveness that is so prevalent today, you know, keeps it alive. But, you know, my hope is that with this truth, you know, there will be more understanding. There will be, you know, for me, like I grew up in I had this kind of, you know, mixed heritage. I grew up in a diverse environment. But I don't know, honestly, if you were to tell me what I thought of when I heard of Africa, it was like inferior conditions, you know, and that is, you know, that was conditioned into me. I wasn't born there. That was a conditioning. But, you know, doing this research and writing this book has brought me to the realization that, you know, that was totally false. You know, Africa is what brought Europe out of its dark ages. That is actually the truth. And so it's really a legacy that we need to restore for the benefit of not only the Black community, because, you know, that is who it has oppressed the most, but for the benefit of all mankind.
Well, Dave, thank you so much, man. You got to come back when you finish your children's book.
I will.
To come back, because I'm going to be
will
keep up with all your stuff. And again, thank you so much for being on the show, man.
Oh, my pleasure, Alvin. Thank you.
Make sure y'all share, watch. Make sure you follow this guy. I mean, definitely download the book, especially since it's not costing you anything. But definitely check out Dave's social media page, because every day Dave comes and is like, "Yep, I found something else, y'all." And I really like when you do that, because I watch your stuff every day. Like, here's one other comparison. You gotta look. So thanks, Dave.
Awesome. Thank you, Alvin.
You have a great day.
You too. Bye.